I'm Jenna Parker, 32 years old, and that October evening my father's voicemail hit like a punch to the gut. Transfer the money now, or expect a call from our lawyer. His voice growled through my phone, cold and commanding. My hands shook, but I didn't hesitate. I typed back 2 words. Go ahead. 48 hours later, my phone was buzzing with 24 missed calls, his lawyer practically begging for a response, voice cracking with panic. I didn't answer. See, my parents thought they could control me, my career, my future, all through a family trust they dangled over my head. But I was done playing their game. That voicemail wasn't just a threat, it was the spark that ignited everything. What happened next turned my life upside down, exposed secrets I never saw coming, and cost my parents more than they ever imagined. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I just acted. Stick around to see how it all unfolded. You won't believe where this story ends. If you've ever stood up to family pressure, share your story in the comments below and hit that subscribe button to follow my journey through this chaos. Growing up in the Hayes household felt like living under a microscope. My father, Robert Hayes, was a real estate investor in Jacksonville, a man whose every word carried the weight of a contract. Success wasn't just expected, it was demanded. By the time I was 10, he had mapped out my future: a business degree, a corner office, and a life that mirrored his own. My dreams of working in media, crafting stories through visuals and sound, were dismissed as childish fantasies. You'll thank me when you're running a company, he'd say, his voice sharp enough to cut through my protests. I learned early that arguing with him was like arguing with a brick wall, pointless and exhausting. My mother, Linda, was different, but no less trapped. She ran an event planning business, orchestrating lavish weddings and corporate galas, with a smile that never reached her eyes. When my father's demands filled the room, she'd stay silent, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Once, when I was 12, I begged her to let me join a school film club. She hesitated, glanced at my father, and whispered, "It's not practical, Jenna." That was her way, soft deflections that left me feeling like I'd failed her too. Her silence wasn't agreement, but it wasn't defiance either. It was survival. School was my only escape, but even that came with strings. My father insisted I excel in math and economics, subjects he deemed useful. I'd spend hours at the dining table, his eyes boring into me as I struggled through equations. Mediocrity isn't an option, he'd snap if I faltered. By high school, I was sneaking art classes, hiding sketchbooks under my bed, terrified he'd find them. One night, he did. He tore the pages out, calling them a waste of time. I cried myself to sleep, promising I'd never let him see my passion again. My brother Timothy, 3 years older, seemed to fit the mold my father wanted. He studied finance, landed a job at a Jacksonville bank, and never questioned the path laid out for him. At family dinners, he'd nod along as my father lectured about investments and ambition. But I caught glimpses of something else: tightened jawlines, fleeting frowns when my father wasn't looking. Once, when I was 16, Timothy found me editing a short video on my laptop. "That's really good," he said quietly, then added, "Don't let Dad see it." His words stuck with me, not just the warning, but the way his voice softened, like he understood the weight I carried. The family trust was the invisible chain binding us all. My father controlled it, a fund built from his real estate deals, and he used it to dictate our choices. When I turned 18, he offered to pay for college, but only if I majored in business. I wanted to say no, to run toward the life I imagined, but the trust was a lifeline I couldn't afford to lose. So I enrolled at the University of North Florida, studying marketing, a compromise I thought he'd tolerate. He didn't. "Marketing is fluff," he scoffed at my graduation. "You should have gone into finance like Timothy." I bit my tongue, but the resentment simmered. Looking back, those years shaped me in ways I didn't expect. I learned to hide parts of myself, to bury my dreams under layers of obedience. But the more I suppressed, the stronger my resolve grew. I wasn't just fighting for a career, I was fighting for the right to define my own life. By the time I left home at 22, I thought I'd escaped my father's grip. I was wrong. His control followed me, woven into every decision, every dollar tied to that trust. And it wasn't until much later that I realized Timothy, despite his compliance, was carrying his own quiet rebellion. Everything shifted when I met Matthew Brooks at a Jacksonville music festival. I was 30, still licking wounds from years of my father's control when I saw him adjusting soundboards at a local band set. His easy smile and quiet confidence pulled me in. "You're into this stuff?" he asked, catching me watching the stage crew. I nodded shyly, admitting my passion for media. Instead of brushing it off, he lit up. "You should be up there making the story happen," he said, gesturing to the vibrant crowd. For the first time, someone saw me not the version my father wanted, but the real me. We talked for hours, swapping dreams over cheap festival coffee. Matthew, an audio engineer, lived for music and freedom, unbothered by corporate ladders. His words stuck life's too short to live someone else's plan. Months later, I invited Matthew to a family dinner at my parents' house, hoping to share my happiness. I should have known better. The table was set for tension, not celebration. My father sat at the head, his eyes narrowing as I introduced Matthew. "So you're the sound guy," he said, his tone dripping with disdain. "Must be tough scraping by on gigs." I felt my face burn, but Matthew just smiled, unfazed. "I love what I do," he replied calmly, "and it pays the bills." My father snorted, launching into a lecture about real careers and stability. He didn't stop there. "Jenna needs someone grounded," he said, as if I weren't sitting right in front of him. I gripped my fork, willing myself to speak, but the words caught in my throat. My mother stayed silent, her eyes fixed on her plate. I'd hoped for a flicker of support, a nod, anything, but she offered nothing. "Mom," I said quietly, "don't you think Matthew's work is interesting?" She glanced up, her lips parting, then closed them again. "It's different," she mumbled, barely audible. Her silence stung worse than my father's words. I looked to Timothy, my brother, sitting across the table. He'd always been the obedient one, but I thought he might back me up. Instead, he shifted uncomfortably, muttering something about work and changing the subject. "How's the bank?" Tim, my father, asked. And just like that, the conversation moved on, leaving me and Matthew in the dust. After dinner, Matthew squeezed my hand under the table. "I'm fine," he whispered. But I wasn't. Driving home, I couldn't shake the anger. "Why didn't you push back harder?" I asked him, my voice sharper than I meant. He sighed. "I didn't want to make it worse for you." His calmness only frustrated me more. I felt like I was fighting alone, caught between my family's expectations and the life I wanted with him. That night, I lay awake, replaying my father's sneer, my mother's silence, Timothy's avoidance. I'd brought Matthew into my world, hoping they'd see what I saw in him. Instead, they'd dismissed him and me without a second thought. It wasn't just about that dinner. It was about every moment I'd let them define me. Something had to change. The real trouble began when my parents invested in my media startup. I'd spent years building my company, a small Jacksonville outfit creating promotional videos for local businesses. It was my lifeline, proof I could chase my passion despite my father's disdain. But when cash flow tightened, I made the mistake of accepting their help. My father didn't just offer money, he offered the family trust, a fund built from his real estate empire. I thought it was a gesture of faith. I was wrong. "We're partners now," he said, his smile more contract than kindness. From that moment, every decision I made had to pass his approval. "Want to hire a new editor?" He demanded their resume. "Want to pitch a bold campaign?" He'd shoot it down as too risky. My company. My dream was slipping through my fingers, tethered to his control. Things got worse when Matthew and I started planning our wedding. We'd set a date for the following spring, dreaming of a simple ceremony in a Jacksonville park. I was naive enough to think my parents would be happy for me. Instead, My father called me to his office, a sterile space lined with property deeds. "You need to postpone the wedding," he said, leaning back in his chair. "Your company's not stable enough. Focus on the business." I stared at him, stunned. "Dad, this is my life, not a board meeting," I shot back. His eyes narrowed. "The trust is funding your life," he said. "If you want to keep it, you'll listen." The threat hung heavy, Mary Matthew, and he'd pull the plug on my company. I felt my chest tighten, the weight of his words pressing down. I turned to Matthew that night, expecting him to share my outrage. "Can you believe him?" I asked, pacing our apartment. Matthew frowned, his voice steady. "He's bluffing, Jenna. He won't let your company fail, it's his money too." But I wasn't so sure. My father didn't bluff. He calculated. Every dollar from the trust came with strings, and now those strings were tightening around my future with Matthew. I refused to postpone the wedding. "This is our choice," I told my father in a heated call. "You don't get to decide this." His response was ice cold. "Push me and I'll pull every cent." "You'll have nothing." The line went dead, leaving me shaking with anger and fear. My company, my dream was on the line, and so was my relationship. Later that week, my mother sent me a text. "I'm sorry about your father," it read. "He just wants what's best." I stared at the screen, my heart sinking. It was the same old pattern, her quiet apologies, never loud enough to challenge him. "Mom, why can't you stand up to him?" I typed back, my fingers trembling. She didn't reply. Her silence, like always, spoke louder than words. I wanted to scream, to beg her to see how much this hurt, but I knew it was pointless. She'd chosen her side long ago, and it wasn't mine. Matthew held me as I cried, promising we'd find a way through. But the fear lingered. My father's threat wasn't just about money. It was about breaking me, forcing me to bend to his will. I wasn't sure how much longer I could fight. By spring, my world turned upside down. I thought Matthew and I could push through the storm of my father's threats to pull funding from my media startup. We'd faced his control before, his demands to postpone our wedding, his grip on my company, but I believed our love was stronger. Then one evening, everything changed. Matthew came home from a gig hours later than usual, his face pale, his usual confidence replaced by a shadow I couldn't read. He'd been out meeting someone, but he wouldn't say who. "We need to talk," he said, his voice low, almost broken. I sat on the couch, my heart pounding as he paced the room. "I can't do this anymore, Jenna," he said, avoiding my eyes. "You're better off without me. I'm setting you free." I froze, his words slicing through me like a blade. "What are you talking about?" I demanded, standing up, my voice shaking. "Is this about my father? Did something happen today?" He shook his head, his jaw tight, but offered no explanation. "I'm just not enough for you," he muttered, grabbing his jacket. Before I could stop him, he walked out. The door clicked shut, leaving me alone in our apartment, the silence deafening. My mind raced. Matthew had never been this distant. Why now? What happened during those hours he was gone? I sensed something was off, but the pieces wouldn't fit together. I spent that night replaying his words, searching for answers. "Setting you free." It made no sense. We'd fought so hard to build a life together, to stand up to my parents' control. Why would he abandon me now? I called him. Texted him, begged for clarity, but my phone stayed silent. By morning, my anger turned to despair. The apartment we'd shared felt like a cage, every corner holding memories of us planning our wedding, laughing over late-night takeout. I couldn't stay there. I packed a bag and drove to Caitlin Walsh, my best friend and a real estate lawyer in Jacksonville. "I need a place to crash," I told her, my voice barely holding together. Caitlin didn't ask questions. "You're staying with me," she said, pulling me into a hug. Her condo became my sanctuary, a place to breathe away from my parents' reach and the echo of Matthew's goodbye. Over coffee the next morning, I poured out my pain to Caitlin. "He just left?" I said, my hands trembling around the mug. "He wouldn't even tell me why. He was gone all afternoon meeting someone, and then he comes back and ends it. Caitlin's eyes narrowed. That's not like Matthew, she said. Something's wrong. Did he say anything about who he saw? I shook my head, the knot in my chest tightening. He wouldn't talk. Just said he's not enough for me. Caitlin leaned forward, her voice firm. Jenna, you know him. He doesn't give up easily. Someone got to him. Her words sparked a flicker of doubt. Was it my father? My mother I didn't know, but the suspicion gnawed at me, fueling both my hurt and my resolve. The days that followed were a blur of grief and questions. I kept seeing Matthew's face, the way he couldn't meet my eyes when he left. I thought about my father's threats to pull funding, his insistence that I didn't need distractions like a wedding. My mother's quiet apologies, never backed by action, echoed in my mind. Had they done something to push him away? I wanted to confront them, to demand answers. But I had no proof, only a gut feeling that Matthew's absence wasn't his choice alone. At night, in Caitlin's guest room, I lay awake replaying every moment, every fight with my parents. The weight of their control over my company, my dreams. Now my heart was crushing me. But something shifted as I talked with Caitlin. She didn't let me wallow. You're not defined by their rules, she said one evening, handing me a glass of wine. Or by Matthew's decision. You're Jenna Parker, and you've built something incredible with your company. Don't let them take that from you. Her words hit hard. I was hurt, lost, but not powerless. My father thought he could dictate my life with his money. Matthew thought leaving would save me from whatever he was facing. But I wasn't a pawn in their games. I decided then and there to fight for my company, my dreams, and my future on my terms. No one, not even the people I loved, would control me anymore. Sitting in Caitlin's condo, I decided to fight for my freedom. My media startup, the one thing I'd poured my heart into, was still under my father's thumb through the family trust. Caitlin, ever the practical lawyer, saw the fire in my eyes. We can get you out of this, she said, spreading legal documents across her kitchen table. The trust is complicated, but there's a way to transfer ownership back to you, legally. She outlined the process we'd need to prove the company's independence, file for a buyout of their shares, and secure financing to replace their investment. It sounded daunting, but for the first time in months I felt a spark of hope. Let's do it, I said, my voice steady. The next hurdle was getting the financial details of the trust. That's where Timothy came in. He showed up at Caitlin's place unannounced, his usual polished banker demeanor replaced by something softer. I saw how Dad's been treating you, he said, sitting across from me. It's not right. I was stunned. Timothy had always played by my father's rules. But seeing me unravel after losing Matthew had shifted something in him. I can get you the trust's banking records, he offered quietly. It'll show their stake in your company. I hesitated, knowing this could put him at odds with our parents. Are you sure? I asked. He nodded. You deserve to be free, Jenna. For the first time, I saw my brother as an ally, not just a bystander. Timothy delivered. He slipped me a USB drive with account statements and investment logs, all pulled from his bank system. The numbers confirmed what I feared. My father's control over my company wasn't just emotional, it was contractual, with clauses tying my decisions to his approval. Armed with this, Caitlin connected me with Patricia Foster, a bank employee who specialized in corporate transfers. This won't be easy, Patricia warned when we met at her office. Your parents' investment gives them leverage, but we can draft a buyout agreement. She walked me through the paperwork, explaining how to restructure the company's ownership. I spent sleepless nights reviewing every detail, determined to get it right. Patricia's calm expertise kept me grounded. You're doing the right thing, she said, handing me the final forms to sign. With the paperwork ready, I faced the hardest step, confronting my parents. I called them to their house, my stomach in knots. My father sat in his usual chair, his expression unreadable, while my mother fidgeted beside him. I'm buying you out of my company, I said, forcing my voice to stay firm. I've got the financing and the paperwork's done. My father's eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Jenna, he said. You'll ruin everything without my support. My mother stayed silent, her hands clasped tightly. Mom say something, I pressed, but she only shook her head. The air was thick with tension, their disapproval palpable. I knew they wouldn't let go easily, but I was ready for the fight. My company, my life, was mine to reclaim. The meeting at Stephen Clark's office marked the end of their control. I'd spent weeks preparing, fueled by a resolve that had hardened since I walked away from my parents' demands. Caitlin had worked tirelessly to ensure every document was airtight. We sat in Stephen's office, a sleek space in downtown Jacksonville, waiting for my parents to arrive. Stephen Clark, a seasoned attorney with a reputation for handling high-stakes disputes, had agreed to oversee the meeting. "You're ready for this?" he told me, his voice calm but firm. I nodded, clutching the folder of paperwork that would sever my company from the family trust. My stomach churned, but I wasn't backing down. My father walked in first, his posture rigid, his eyes scanning the room like he owned it. My mother followed, her expression a mix of anxiety and resignation. "What's this about Jenna?" my father asked, his tone sharp as he sat across from me. I took a deep breath, meeting his gaze. "I'm withdrawing your investment from my company," I said, my voice steady. "I don't need your money anymore. I've secured new financing and the paperwork is complete." I slid the documents across the table. My father's face darkened, but my mother's eyes widened, her hands twisting in her lap. "You're throwing away everything we've built for you," my father said, his voice low and dangerous. "Dad, you didn't build my company?" I shot back. "I did." The room tensed as my father leaned forward. "You think you can just walk away?" he said. "I'll sue you for breach of contract. You'll lose everything." Caitlin didn't flinch. "There's no breach," she said, her voice cutting through his threat. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a stack of papers. "The buyout agreement complies with the trust's terms. Jenna has fulfilled every legal obligation." She handed copies to Stephen, who reviewed them with a nod. "She's right," Stephen said, looking at my father. "The documents are ironclad. Jenna has the right to repurchase your shares, and she's secured the funds to do it." My father's jaw tightened, his usual control slipping. I could see the anger in his eyes, but for once it didn't shake me. My mother finally spoke, her voice trembling. "Jenna, please, let's talk about this. We can work it out as a family." I turned to her, my heart aching but resolute. "Mom, you've had years to stand up for me," I said. "You chose silence every time. I'm done waiting for you to change." Her face crumpled, but she didn't argue. My father, however, wasn't finished. "You're making a mistake," he said, his voice rising. "You'll fail without us. You're not strong enough to do this alone." His words stung, echoing every doubt I'd ever had. But I wasn't that scared girl anymore. "I'm not alone," I said, glancing at Caitlin. "And I'm stronger than you think." Caitlin took over, laying out the legal steps we'd taken. She explained how the new financing secured through a local investment group replaced the trust's funds. She detailed the transfer of ownership, ensuring my company was fully mine again. My father tried to interrupt, but Stephen raised a hand. "Let her finish," he said firmly. Caitlin continued, her confidence unshaken. "Any attempt to challenge this in court will fail," she said. "We've consulted experts, reviewed every clause, and followed every regulation. Jenna's company is hers, free and clear." I watched my father's expression shift from anger to grudging realization. He wasn't used to losing, but he had no leverage left. I stood up, feeling the weight of years lift off my shoulders. "This isn't about revenge," I said, looking at both my parents. "It's about my life. I built my company, and I'll protect it. I don't need your approval or your money." My father stared at me, his silence louder than any threat. My mother reached for my hand, her eyes pleading. "Jenna, we just want what's best for you," she said softly. I pulled away. "No, Mom. You wanted control. That's over now." The finality of my words hung in the air, and for the first time I felt truly free. As we left Stephen's office, Caitlin squeezed my shoulder. "You did it," she said, a proud smile on her face. I nodded, but the victory was bittersweet. I'd reclaimed my company, my life, but at the cost of my family. My parents' control had defined me for so long, but I'd broken free. Whatever came next, I'd face it on my terms. 8 months later, I stood in a Jacksonville park ready to start anew. My company had become my anchor, thriving without the shadow of my parents' control. I was at a media event networking with local journalists when I saw Matthew across the crowd. My heart stopped. He looked hesitant, his eyes searching mine. I hadn't seen him since he walked out, leaving me with questions that haunted me. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice soft but urgent. I nodded, and we stepped away from the buzz of the event. "I owe you the truth," he said, his hands shoved in his pockets. "Your parents pressured me to leave you. They said I was holding you back, that I'd ruin your future. I thought letting you go was the only way to protect you." His words hit like a wave, confirming the suspicions I'd buried. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice trembling with hurt and relief. Matthew looked down. "I didn't want you to fight them because of me. I thought you'd be better off." I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I fought them anyway," I said. "I took back my company, my life. I'm free now. Matthew and I did it for me." His eyes softened, a flicker of hope breaking through. "I never stopped loving you," he said. In that moment, I knew we could rebuild. I told him everything: how I'd cut ties with my parents, how I'd chosen my own path. By the end of the night, we were laughing, tentative but real, like the first days we met. Months later, we stood in that same park, exchanging vows in a small ceremony. No one from the Hayes family was there. My father and mother had faded from my life, their absence a choice I'd made to protect my peace. Our wedding was simple, surrounded by friends who'd become my family. Matthew squeezed my hand as we promised to face the future together. No conditions, no control. My company continued to grow, landing major clients and standing strong on its own. I'd proven I didn't need my parents' money or approval to succeed. Meanwhile, I heard through industry contacts that my father and mother were struggling. Their decision to pull funds from my company at the wrong time had backfired, draining their trust and tarnishing their reputation in Jacksonville's real estate circles. I didn't take joy in their downfall, but it confirmed what I'd learned: their control was built on fragile ground. They'd tried to chain me to their world, but I'd broken free. Looking back, I realized the cost of my freedom was steep but necessary. I'd lost my family, but I'd gained something greater: a life built on my values, not theirs. Love, I learned, wasn't about sacrifice or control. It was about trust and choosing each other every day. Matthew and I were proof of that. As I stood in that park, my hand in his, I knew I'd chosen right. The past was gone, and I was finally whole.